One story we're covering, breaking news on Art International today. Overnight, civilians are among those killed as US warships have battered a government-controlled airbase in Syria's Homs province with dozens of missiles.
A number of measures aimed at strengthening and improving the effectiveness of Syrian air defenses will be implemented in the near future.
Russia is taking steps in response to that large-scale US missile strike on a Syrian base by temporarily suspending its flight security agreement with the US over Syria.
And a Syrian governor tells us that Islamic State now today stepping up its offensive in Syria off the back of this US strike overnight as government forces hold off an ISIL advance towards the city of Palmyra.
Hello and welcome to the news from RT International. It's now 3 p.m. here in the Russian capital. It's Kevin Owen and Colin Bray with you for our continuing coverage of the US missile strike in Syria.
Yeah, Colin, we're going to start with the breaking news, and if you just joined us, let's bring you up to speed with it from Syria, where a government air base has been hit in a US missile attack. We've got live latest pictures to show from the Shariat military airfield. These latest in, which overnight was targeted in a large-scale cruise missile attack from US warships just off the Crete Islands. This is the first direct US military action against President Assad's government. It's supposedly in retaliation for an alleged chemical assault earlier this week.
Well, you can see that some of the structures at that base, and these pictures we're showing you right now, have been destroyed. Russia's defense ministry says it includes a material storage depot, a training facility, a canteen, 6 aircraft, and a radar station. As far as we can make out, the runway remains undamaged. Donald Trump earlier gave this statement from Florida.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons, violated its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and ignored the urging of the UN Security Council.
Former CIA officer Jack Rice told us the Trump administration's decision is emotional, he thinks, rather than strategic here. Coming up in just a moment, that clip.
The problem with making an emotional decision like this is it ignores tactics, it ignores strategy, and in the end, the problem is people keep saying, okay, so you've just hit Assad. Now what? What does this do differently? The shift in what's happened with Assad and in Syria is going to cause a ripple effect across the country because of who controls what, and you will see a pushback from ISIS now. What we saw back in 2013 and before from the Obama administration was that they were talking about airstrikes, but they actually pulled back from that bright line, and now we see a fundamental shift for the United States government. We have not seen this in Syria before.
Right, let's talk to RT correspondent Caleb Mopen. He can update us on one or two things. Caleb, good to see you. What more do we know about President Trump's decision?
Well, at this point, from what we understand, it was 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles that hit the airbase, and that Russia was informed about it, and that the United States did not target sections of the airfield in which Russian forces and Russian equipment were stationed. Now, at this point, it's important to note that Donald Trump, he came out, he said that he was certain that this chemical weapons attack in the Idlib province had been carried out by the Syrian government, that they were responsible and had intentionally done this. However, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has just now begun its investigation, and there are no real facts and details to confirm what Donald Trump is saying and to confirm the allegations that have been made against the Syrian government. Now, U.S. Secretary of State, the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said that the United States is now going to pursue the removal of Syrian President Bashar Assad through Geneva. This is what he had to say.
will you and President Trump organize an international coalition to remove Assad?
Those steps are underway.
Now, there has been an interesting response from various figures in U.S. politics. There have been voices opposing and condemning the airstrike and saying that Donald Trump should not have done it without the authorization of Congress, whereas there have also been many voices supporting the action that he took. John McCain and Lindsey Graham saluted the strikes as they were critical of Trump's foreign policy before. They seem to be in approval of what he's done. Now, Rand Paul, the congressman, he came forward and said that Congress needed to authorize this action and that Donald Trump did not have the authority to take this action without approval of Congress. Furthermore, we've had statements from Tim Kaine, who was the running mate of Hillary Clinton, and he also echoed the sentiments that Donald Trump did not have the authority to authorize these strikes without consulting Congress. So there are many voices in the United States. There is a diversity of response. But as of now, it seems that the United States will be pursuing the removal of President Assad, and they'll be trying to remove him through the Geneva process.
Okay, Callum Open in New York, thanks very much for updating us on that. Kevin, the one thing that seems, I mean, whatever happens, even if this is just a one-off strike, the level of geopolitical standoff is just going to be mighty now, isn't it? And thinking of the shifting sands that we've had over the past few weeks, America talking about working with Russia, Turkey talking about working with Russia, and how that is all now shifting. And when you have some powerful NATO voices like France, Germany and the United Kingdom all saying, well done, you needed to do this kind of action, even though he didn't seek international approval, it's probably going to be very troubling for some in other parts of the world.
Yeah, indeed. And Rex Tillerson, as we're hearing now, this sort of U-turn within a week, and now calling for saying he will pursue, or the United States will pursue the removal of Assad. Quite how that will happen, or how that will play out, and how that news will be greeted by Russia, of course, and Iran remains to be seen. America's military action has been met with some strong words already from Moscow. Russia's defense ministry has said it's waiting for clarification from the United States on the evidence of the alleged chemical attack. That evidence has still not been put forward. Let's go live to Nikki Aaron for more of the Russian response. Hi, what other comments have we heard, Nikki?
Well, Kevin, we've been following the Ministry of Defence's statement earlier. Spokesperson Igor Konashenkov said that the ministry regards the U.S. actions in Homs province as a gross violation of the Memorandum of Understanding. This was a deal signed between the U.S. and Russia to ensure safety in Syria's airspace. As a result of this violation, that deal has now been suspended. The Defense Ministry is also awaiting a justification from the U.S. for the attack, which it says is based on accusations that the Syrian government violated the Chemical Weapons Convention. They say this claim is groundless. That's because between 2013 and 2016, the Syrian government fully delivered on its promise to destroy its chemical arsenal and its means of producing such chemical weapons. And that was a fact noted and confirmed by the UN Chemical Weapons Watchdog. Also, therefore, the Russian Ministry of Defense is now awaiting the clarification from the US, which the US had claimed was indisputable evidence that the Syrian government had conducted that chemical weapons attack in Idlib province earlier this week. Also, the ministry has confirmed on earlier very concerning reports that in the wake of this attack in Homs province, Islamic State and Jabhat al-Nusra have launched fresh attacks on Syrian army positions in Homs province. They seem to be taking advantage of the chaos and pushing for further action and to make further gains in the province in the wake of this. The ministry spokesperson also added that such a strike that was conducted last night in Homs province requires an elaborate amount of preparation, of intelligence, of logistics, and therefore is not unthinkable that this strike could have been planned way in advance, way before the chemical attack in Idlib province earlier this week, in fact. Let's take a listen to what else he had to say.
A number of measures aimed at strengthening and improving the effectiveness of Syrian air defenses will be implemented in the near future in order to protect vital parts of Syria's infrastructure.
A few hours previous, we also heard from the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as well. He also touched upon how disappointed he was that this would spell deterioration in the ties between the US and Russia. Let's take a listen.
Of course, it's an act of aggression under a completely invented pretext. It looks like they wanted to distract attention from Jabhat al-Nusra, which is seemingly still considered by some a reserve squadron to switch from peace talks to regime change. It's also frustrating that it harms already soured relations between Russia and the US. But I hope those provocations won't lead to any irreversible consequences.
And the very latest I can bring you is that the Russian President Vladimir Putin has held a meeting with the Russian Security Council during which the US attack was called an act of aggression which violates international law, and concerns have been raised about the negative consequences that will come as a result of this attack, which have been called inevitable.
Nikki, thanks for the update there.
Of course, I suppose that pre-planned question is going to be an increasing one in the coming weeks, because those warships have been in the Eastern Mediterranean for quite some time. People are going to be thinking it was always going to be a question of when rather than if.
So now the thought that maybe this was on the cards even before the chemical attack whoever caused it.
Sure, maybe.
Now, the governor of Homs province has told RT that Islamic State's launched an offensive, as we were saying, there now in the area following the US strikes. They're seeing this as a bit of a door open, a wedge in. The Syrian official also said that the terrorists have specifically targeted oil-rich areas now near Palmyra. That's, of course, the way they get the money into themselves. But so far, they've been held back, he went on to say. He also added that the US missile strikes will strengthen the terrorist position in that region.
The Sherat airfield supports airstrikes against Islamic State. With its help, the Syrian army managed to liberate numerous areas near the city of Palmyra. The US missile strike is an act of aggression against the Syrian Arab Republic, with the aim to weaken its ability to fight ISIL. This is direct support for terrorists in this region. According to all international regulations, this aggression should be condemned. At this time, the Syrian army is fighting against the terrorists, following them to the east of Palmyra.
As we've heard from the governor of Homs statement, the Syrian government and army are saying that this American attack has unwittingly benefited ISIS, which was recently pushed out of the ancient city of Palmyra, the mountains and gas fields surrounding it. Now, it wouldn't be the first time that American strikes on Syrian army positions have benefited ISIS. Last year, a massive American attack killed scores of Syrian army soldiers who were already besieged by ISIS forces in the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor. Back then, the Americans claimed that that attack on the Syrian army was a mistake. Nevertheless, it enabled ISIS to make a hugely important gain and capture the strategic mountain where the Syrian army were attacked by the Americans. And over the course of the Syrian conflict, the Americans have a steady track record of their involvement in the conflict, benefiting extremist groups. At the start of the conflict, the US backed several factions that then went on to join extremist Al-Qaeda-affiliated organizations and ISIS. And of course, the Pentagon even admitted that its flagship $500 million train and equip program went on to result in the recruits to that program handing over US-made weapons to Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria, then named Jabhat al-Nusra. And this latest attack comes at a time when the Syrian army is facing threats from extremist groups on multiple fronts. Just over the last couple of days, Al-Qaeda's latest incarnation in Syria announced that it was launching a new offensive on the Syrian army in the Latakia province. So there is, of course, some concern that any further American action will be capitalized on by extremist groups, as we're seeing by these reports of this ISIS offensive in the wake of this massive American attack on the Syrian army airbase in Homs.
We heard from a top advisor to the Syrian president to get Bashar Assad's view on Washington's attack overnight.
Well, and it is a violation of international law, and it is a violation of our sovereignty, and we believe that it is going to backfire on them, because it will only make us and our allies more determined to defeat terrorism. And it also speaks volumes about the stand of the West towards terrorists. And then how do they care about the 50 children in Khan Sheikhoun while they killed hundreds of our soldiers in Deir ez-Zor, and they would not, they took weeks to acknowledge that they were killed through their airstrike. You know, there are so many contradictions in the Western discourse towards Syria. All what I can say to anybody who is listening to me, that the reality in Syria is absolutely different from what American, French, and British government try to portray to Western audiences. Syrian Arab government has no chemical weapons, would never ever use chemical weapons, but it has no chemical weapons anyway in order to use them. The attack of the American on our airbase only played to the hands of the terrorists and lifted their morale, and in fact came to support them. No matter what they do and no matter what they try, I think they have to believe that a country that has been fighting terrorism for 7 years and had been successful in that, we are not going to give up our fight until we achieve final victory and we prevail, and we are sure we will.
Well, America's first direct action comes after that alleged chemical attack claimed the lives of 80 people on Tuesday in Syria. And a few weeks ago, in the Iraqi city of Mosul, a US-led coalition airstrike reportedly killed more than 200. In both cases, government sources claimed that terrorist munitions were the targets. The Syria attack sparked immediate reaction, both in the media and from Western officials. But the one in Mosul didn't attract anywhere near as much attention. RT's Murad Gazdiev, who's spent several weeks in the Iraqi city of Mosul, has been comparing the two cases.
Let's be blunt. Civilian casualties are always a tragedy. It doesn't matter where they happen, how many people die. It is always wrong. They shouldn't have to die in these conflicts. Nevertheless, we have this new trend where some civilian casualties matter more than others, way more, depending on where they happened and who they were caused by. And take, for example, the chemical attack in Idlib. It was horrendous, disgusting, you know, and the people behind it must be punished, identified and punished. But the media was all over it within minutes of it happening. Within an hour, you had politicians coming out, condemning the attack and already passing sentence.
If this were proved to have been committed by the Assad regime, then it would be another reason to think they're an absolutely heinous outfit. It is a war crime.
Bashar al-Assad counts on the complicity of his allies to act with impunity.
My attitude toward Syria and Assad has changed very much.
A day after it happened, they hold an emergency UN Security Council meeting. They open the meeting by saying that we don't have the facts. We don't have proof that this attack came from the air, that it was Syrian military jets that caused this chemical attack. Politicians don't care. They jumped the gun on this one. They don't need an investigation. They don't need evidence. They don't need proof. They already know who did it.
Reports have stated that the attack was carried out through an airstrike on a residential area. However, the means of delivery of the alleged attack cannot be definitely confirmed at this stage.
We have every indication that this was a sustained attack using aircraft over a number of hours.
That we are compelled to take our own action.
Lethal toxic substances were dropped from the air.
The means of delivery of the alleged attack cannot be definitely confirmed at this stage.
Now, just east 500 kilometers of Idlib, where this chemical attack took place, is Mosul, where a few weeks ago, 200 civilians reportedly were killed in a suspected US-led coalition airstrike. That happened a week before the media started reporting on it. It took pundits an entire week, politicians, to react, to acknowledge that all these people had been killed. No one talked about outrage, war crimes, the need to bomb anyone, or, you know, punishment at all. In fact, they suppressed it. The United States said, the Iraqi military said, the coalition said, hold your horses, we need to investigate first.
This investigation continues, and there is still much to learn from this. The investigation will confirm or deny our initial impressions and highlight the lessons learned.
Perhaps civilians are being killed either by mistake or because the enemy is using a tactic that actually has them become part of the target. That is on them, not on us.
I share your concern, Congresswoman.
It's worse than hypocrisy, almost any way you look at it. It's manipulation. It is suppression. They'll show you pictures of deceased civilians, of children killed in these chemical attacks, when it suits them. But when it's the victims, people killed by, for example, a US-led coalition airstrike, that's when, for some reason, those deaths apparently matter less than those in Syria.
Yasir Yakis is a Turkish politician and former foreign minister. He's joining us now on the line. Sir, thanks for your time. Ankara, though, calling on the international community to establish a no-fly zone and a safe zone in Syria. It's been willing to do that for quite some time. Is this the perfect pretext now to carry that through?
Well, first of all, I do not know, I couldn't understand exactly Turkish government's proposition, because to establish no-fly zone is one thing, a safe zone is something else. And for both, you need international legitimacy. International legitimacy means Security Council decision, and when Russia is there, and if it doesn't agree, this legitimacy cannot be established. If it is agreed one way or another, then there is a question who is going to enforce this decision, that's to say, who is going to protect the no-fly zone. These are things which is not clear yet, as far as I can see. Turkish government was voicing this proposal since the beginning, but it could not persuade the international community to take a positive action. Perhaps with the latest development, there may be other opportunities, especially by agreeing between Russia and the United States, something may come out.
Turkey's foreign minister has now asked for talks with his Russian and American counterparts after what happened last night, this US strike. What could that achieve?
Well, I don't think that it could achieve anything. It will, first of all, hamper and make more difficult Russian and United States cooperation for the solution of the Syrian crisis, because the trust will be gone, and to re-establish the trust to the level that it was there before the chemical weapon question, and now the missile problem has happened. So now we are far back from the point where we have been a few days ago.
What role can Turkey play in this now? Because, of course, it's only just completed its own action on the border with Syria. That wrapped up barely a week ago now. And there were talks of Turkey and Russia trying to work together. That now feels like it's being wound back. Given the Turkish military size in NATO, what role can Turkey play to try and solve this?
Actually, if the agreement is reached on the solid grounds, Turkey and the United States, and in cooperation with Russia, because Russia now is also a very important player in Syria, very concrete and positive steps could have been taken in order to stabilize the situation in Syria. But with the latest development, with the missile attack to the Homs airport, I think we are far now away. We stepped back from the solution and from the cooperation in between Turkey, the United States, and Russia.
German and French leaders are claiming that the blame for the latest developments in Syria lies solely with President Assad. That message, too, was supported by NATO's chief a bit earlier. We're going to listen to that soon. We'll come straight back to you.
The Syrian regime bears the full responsibility for this development. NATO has consistently condemned Syria's continued use of chemical weapons as a clear breach of international norms and agreements.
In Stoltenberg, pretty set in his ways, he thinks he's responsible here, but the investigation is still continuing. The actual, as far as we know anyway, the actual culprits for that chemical attack have not been made public. Are the rebels and terrorists not to blame at all here then? Back to you, sir. Who do you think? So NATO, sir, I don't know if you just heard that. Steadfast in what they think happened here and who they think were responsible for the chemical attack in the week. What about the rebels? What about the terrorists? They don't seem to, NATO doesn't seem to have them on the horizon regarding this at all, no? I think
Is this question directed to me?
Yes, it is, yes, sir.
Actually, it made the task of the terrorists much easier, ISIS and the others, because the more the Syrian Air Force and the Syrian army is crippled or is damaged, then the task of the ominous targets of the terrorist organization will be easier to achieve.
We're going to play another little grab now. The US ambassador to the UN claiming that Russia and Iran do not want peace in the region. Again, I'll come back to you, Yassir, to get your thoughts on that when we've heard this.
There is an obvious truth here that must be spoken. The truth is that Assad, Russia, and Iran have no interest in peace.
What is Russia doing in Syria, Yassir, that hampers peace efforts then, in your opinion?
I don't think that Russia hampers the peace efforts. Actually, the international community was slow and perhaps zigzagging in its efforts to control the terrorist attacks or terrorist damage in Syria, and Russia entered with a better strategy and gave priority to the fight against ISIS. And I don't think that what Russia was doing was against the stability in Syria. On the contrary, the Russian strategy was more on solid ground than the strategy of many other countries.
Yassir, Turkish politician, former foreign minister, thanks for making the time to be with us today. Give us your thoughts on this sad news coming overnight. Thanks.
Place on Tuesday.